This is your boy Hound Dog Buck 50. On this episode, we're going to talk about hip hop. And when did New York hip hop start to lose its sound? We're going to talk about that next on Let's Talk. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk. I'm your boy Hound Dog Buck 50. When did New York hip hop start to lose its sound? Now, this is a subject that often comes up with me and my fellow hip hop comrades. And what I always said I was going to talk about it, but I always get crossed up and never get around to it. I recently was watching an episode of My Expert Opinion when Ed Lover was on the show. And Ed Lover was mentioning, he was basically saying how, once Designer came out, that started to sort of signal the shift. And in these type of conversations, there's always going to be... everybody's going to have their own version of the story. My version is not an argument to say, look, this is when it started, but this is my take on it. Coming from a person from my age category of 53 years old. And I'm sure once certain people of my demographic hear it, even if they don't necessarily agree, they'll be thinking like, that's interesting. I never looked at it like that. Okay, now first of all, by me saying my age, it sort of gives you an indication of my hip hop history, so to speak. And of course, there's people older than me, so their history goes back a little further. But I was a big, fan of Run DMC, Houdini, LL. Then you got the golden era. Big Daddy Kane, Cool G Rap, Kid and Play, MC Shan, Boogie Down Productions, Keith Murray, Redman, Black Moon, The King and I, leaders of the new school. You can just go on and on about the Smith and Wesson, Heavy D and the boys, Pete Rock and CL Smooth. You can just go on and on. I was just a hip hop junkie back then, recording videos, buying CDs, buying tapes before I switched over. And so, okay, I heard what Ed Lover said. And to me, I always looked at it a little differently. And when I give my take on what I'm going to give my take on, keep in mind I'm not dissing the other genre of music either. I'm just merely saying this is where I think it started, because a lot of times when these things happen, people look at it like, okay, it was a sudden switch. It was when this person made this song in 2015, that's when it switched. I looked at it as more of a slow build over a couple of decades to get to this point. For those that's old enough to remember, Do or Die had a song called Po Pimp featuring Twista. It was a dope song. Do You Want to Ride in the Backseat of a Caddy? Chop it up with Do or Die. And they had a very unique style. It was I call it double time, like I mean, you had rappers in New York who rapped fast at one time, like Jay-Z, but this wasn't just, it was a different type of style, the way the cadence, the way they did it. And it was a very popular song. I believe that song may have come out in 96 or somewhere in that mid-90s. But after that, a lot of New York MCs, male or female, a lot of them had at least one song. And I'm not, if you're from my time, you know what, I'm not lying about this. A lot of them had a song where they would try to duplicate that style. The da-na-na, da-da-da, da-na-na, da-da-da, da-na-na. You know this. This is a fact. And I remember thinking, like, I remember when I started to hear that, I remember thinking, like, man, New York is, I feel like they're giving in. And when I say giving in, I'm not criticizing Do or Die. I'm just saying giving in the sense of getting off their high horse and finally, because New York was always the mecca of hip hop. I'm from Jersey, but I've lived in Florida for many years. But I would hear the stories of how it was hard for even people from Philly to get love from New York. And of course, then when you had people from the South, like Two Live Crew, they would call them country or whatever. I'd hear the stories. If you've even watched like a lot of recent episodes with Big Gip, where it seems like he's kind of going off on New York, I don't really pay it any mind because I know where a lot of that comes from, because the South was really, given a hard time by New York for a while there. But to get back to what I'm saying was, New York was always the trendsetter. They were always the person on the dance floor, so to speak, where everybody else sort of looked at them and was like, okay, so that's what y'all doing? But then I felt like when that song by Do or Die took off, I felt like that was the shift. It was a slow shift. And that's when New York started to be the guys looking at the people on the dance floor. It's like the South slowly started to take over the dance floor, and New York was slowly conceding, like, okay, you got it. Let us see what y'all doing. And I really feel like it was a slow, it wasn't like overnight, because that was in the 90s. So, of course, as you go fast forward, you still had people making, hip hop or whatever. And you're still going to have people making hip hop, New York hip hop. Sometimes those people aren't even from New York. But that's when I felt like New York was starting to sort of taking their grip off of their stance and starting to say, like, okay, we need to go with what's popping. Never mind all this New York stuff. And that was my take on it. And so when I hear people say, well, it started, with this song in 2013, and I always felt like it started way before that. But it was a seed. I felt like with Do or Die, that was the seed. And you heard people like Cameron, have a song like that. It was several MCs who had a song like that. It was like that was a thing. You gotta have one song with that, like that Po Pimp type, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And I'm not lying about that. Now, whether you don't agree with me saying that was the start of it, that's understandable, because this isn't an argument to say, I'm telling you this is the facts. But for me, that was the seed when you started to see New York sort of lose its grip, so to speak, and say, okay, let's be the ones to watch the people on the dance floor for a change. And that was the slow changing of the guard. And the South started to take the dance floor, if you will. And New York backed up and started to finally say, okay, let's see how y'all doing it. Okay, this is popping. We're going to take some of that. Whereas before, New York was all about New York. And I'm not lying about that. So to me, that was just my take on it. It's when this started, when New York started to sort of lose its identity. I still, like I said before, I'm not dissing the South. I've lived in the South for almost 40 years. So it's not that. And I'm not dissing Twister, Pole Pimp, because the song was a banger. I'm just giving you my take on when I thought New York hip-hop started to go in a different direction and slowly lose its identity. And I feel it goes way back before Designer. So that was my take on it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, comment, and as always, peace, love, and whatever else you think of love.